Driving tests are a scam. They're fixed, examiners have pass quotas, and you'll never pass your test in the second half of the month if examiners have already filled their quotas for that month, etc., etc. If you're an instructor, I'm sure you have heard these types of claims before, because it's a debate that has been raging for decades amongst both learners and instructors, with a lot of divided opinion. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what I think and why. Hi, I'm Jeff. I've been a grade A instructor and instructor trainer for over 17 years now, and I am passionate about giving honest, impartial advice and guidance to both trainee instructors, fully qualified instructors, and of course learners as well. A few days ago this video popped up in my feed, which also strongly suggests that the DVSA are fixing pass rates and acting fraudulently. Now, full disclosure, I'm not a massive fan of the DVSA. I think a lot of their processes are deeply flawed, and I think they could do a hell of a lot more to support instructors and learners and enhance road safety within the UK. But as I just said, that's my opinion, and perhaps a discussion for another day. Are they fraudulently fixing a driving test pass results though, as suggested in this video? Let's analyse the discussion, and as I said, I'll give you my take. So just to set the scene, these are extracts from a video that was recorded by a guy called Richard Vobes with a former driving instructor called Rob. I don't personally know either of these people, and I'm only responding to the comments that are made within the interview. If you want to check out the full video, I've included the link in the description below. Watch to the end, let me know what you think in the comments below. I think this could get spicy, but I'd love to hear what your personal experiences are, whether you agree with me or not.
Now, Rob, you are back because, ladies and gentlemen, Rob has another scandal up his sleeve, and that is with the, well, not the DVLA, but the DVSA. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct, yeah. DVSA.
Now, you have an interesting claim here, and it may be more than a claim, of course, that a bit like a maths teacher that we had on months ago now, who said that in the O-levels, in the O-level testing, something like 60 or 70% of people taking an O-level test would be failed, come what may, no matter how good they were. And I think you're saying that something similar is going on with the driving test. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. The driving test itself began in 1935, and between the years of 1935 and 1950, the driving test pass rate in the United Kingdom was on average 68 to 72%.
Okay, so Rob, the former driving instructor, has clearly done some sort of Google research, I would think, to help support his arguments and his claims, which I totally get. But as we'll see in a moment, often high-level stats or figures can be very misleading, and you need to dive a lot deeper to really understand what's going on.
But something's happened.
Yep. In my opinion, and after a bit of investigation, the war ended in 45-46, and there was an influx of drivers or men coming back from the war, and I think the roads became quite congested between 46 and 50. So the Department of Transport, in their wisdom, decided to limit the driving test passes to 49.5% in 1950.
And now when?
Whilst I can't prove Rob wrong, I personally can't find any information that supports his argument that the UK government in 1950 decided to deliberately restrict driving test pass rates to 49.5%. And to be perfectly honest, I can't actually understand why that would have been the case. I mean, presumably in 1950, the country would still have been in the process of working hard to recover from the impacts of the Second World War, and surely drivers of cars, vans, trucks and lorries would be, or would have been, a vital part of that recovery process. So I'm not quite sure why they would want to restrict drivers. In fact, according to my research, in 1947, the government decided that anybody who had held a provisional license during the wartime years could convert that to a full license without needing to take a driving test, which certainly doesn't support Rob's claim that they were trying to restrict the number of vehicles on the road. Now, just a little personal anecdote on this. My dad took his driving test in 1948, I think it was. He took it in his works vehicle. He was a fishmonger at the time, so the examiner had to sit next to him in his work van, which didn't have a passenger seat, so the examiner had to sit on a packing crate with no seatbelt, and the van absolutely stank of fish. So not surprisingly, after about 10 minutes, the examiner pulled him over to the side of the road and congratulated him. He'd passed his test, and that was it. Very different times.
When you say they've limited them, how do you limit if people are passing? I mean, if everybody just was brilliant, you know, had wonderful driving instructors like yourself, and all these students were actually passing, how could it be? How could they possibly limit them?
Well, the reason that is because, like the council tax, it's fraudulent.
Right, fraudulent. Now, we've got some figures here that you've supplied.
Yep.
Let's have a look at those.
I personally didn't supply them.
No,
This
hang on,
information.
I've got to go to the right screen.
Yep.
There it is.
This information actually comes from the Department of Transport itself, so the figures are provided by them, and it is an accurate reflection.
So we can't see it terribly clearly, so we'll zoom in there. And as you can see from 2011, well, 2012 certainly in this screen, but it goes back to 2022, you can see the pass rate is hovering around just below 50%. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. It's never been above 50% since 1950.
So if we look at the pass stats by age and gender that are published by the DVSA from 2021 to 2022, then what we can see is the pass rate actually varies quite significantly by age category. So here we can see the pass rates for 16 and 17-year-olds was over 60%, whereas if we look at the pass rates for 60-year-olds within the same time period, it's way down at just about 34%. And these are official figures, again published by the DVSA by driving test centres. And as we can see here, there are test centres that have a way higher pass rate than 50%, and there are also test centres that have a way lower than 50% pass rate. So for example, if you have a look at the April 2023 results for Belvedere in London, you'll see their pass stats were just over 31%, whereas Benbecula Island in the Outer Hebrides for a similar period had a pass rate of over 91%. Now, that's not the DVSA fixing test pass rates. It's purely to do with where the test is being taken. In quiet, remote, rural areas, the test rate typically is going to be a lot higher, but with comparatively few tests being taken. Whereas if you look at the figures for sort of busy inner city areas where the driving conditions are a lot more challenging, but there are far more tests being conducted, then the pass rate is going to be significantly lower. So you don't need to be Einstein to understand that the figures, the high level figures being presented by Richard and Rob can be and are very misleading.
Well, this is a fraud, of course, and people are spending a great deal of money, aren't they? They spend all the time having the wonderful instructors like you, which probably costs them a certain amount of money. I know when I took my test in 1979, it was quite hard to save up the money to be able to have all the lessons that you needed. Then you pass the test, and then if you fail, you've got to start all over again.
Yeah, unfortunately for learners nowadays, the average test fees for you to pass your test is in the region of £1,200.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, that's very expensive, isn't it?
One lesson, which is 2 hours, is approximately between £70 and £90.
And if you fail your test, can you claim the money back or anything?
You can put an appeal in to the Sheriff Court in Scotland or the County Court in England, but it takes approximately 12 months and the licence is not granted. The only thing that they may possibly grant is your £62 back.
Right.
And nobody's going to spend a year trying to get £62 back.
No. And because what I should have said, you might want to appeal the fact that you thought the driving instructor was not, I don't know, some due diligence or hadn't got the eye on the ball, or you felt you had passed, you've done everything right, and he's just failed you willy-nilly, which may well be the case in 50% of the cases that we've just seen. Is that right?
Well, it's not willy-nilly. It's actually done by a computer program, and the computer program is called the Chi-Square, and it's a number crunching program that dissects percentages, and it splits them into neat little pockets, and then it decides who's a pass and who's a fail throughout the whole of the United Kingdom.
Right, so let's dive back into my data analysis days. So we have here Rob suggesting that something called the Chi, which is actually pronounced Chi-Square, is used to determine who is going to pass and who is going to fail their driving tests. And I can tell you that's simply not the case. The Chi-Square is a mathematical model, if you like, which is used to predict outcomes, or forecast them, if you like, based on large samples of historic data. It's not a mathematical model that is used to determine required outcomes, if you like. Now, of course, you might then want to ask the question, well, why would the DVSA want to try to forecast expected outcomes based on age, gender, and test centre? And I think there are a few reasons why they may well want to do that. So, first of all, I expect they want to be able to identify any unusual anomalies that might pop up in test result pass rates, which might then suggest a bit of further investigation might be needed in order to ensure that assessment standards, should I say, are being maintained. The second reason is they probably want to use the data to inform local and national government policy, and perhaps most importantly, the third reason is they want to then use that historic data to compare it against current accident rates on the road to see if there is any correlation between what's happening in driving tests and how that's then getting translated into on-road driving standards. And I think that's probably a very valuable tool in helping them to, over time, continue to increase and improve driving standards and decrease and reduce accident rates, injuries and deaths on the road. Let's just fast forward through this particular section of the video, but again, I've included the link to the full video in the information below if you want to go and check it out for yourselves.
So this, you think, or your claim is, and I'm only saying it's a claim because I don't know because I wasn't there, is purely the fact that these examiners are finding some excuse, any excuse for 50% of the people, the students, or the what do you call them, the contestants, not contestants, but the
candidates.
The candidates, thank you very much, that they're finding 50% of the candidates failure. They're making some excuse, even if they have drived exemplary.
If they drive exemplary and they're on the 49.5% pass sheet, they'll pass. If they're on the 50.5 percent fail sheet, they'll fail, whether they drive excellently or not.
That is madness. Why do you suppose that is? I mean, other than just, why would they risk a blatant scam like that?
Well, the Department of Transport, know that they cannot be challenged because a driving test fail is a fail. You can apply for an appeal, but the appeal itself does not give you the licence back. It's a straightforward fail, and that's it. There is no licence to be returned at an appeal. So the other thing is that they're doing is there are 1.6 million driving tests annually in the United Kingdom, and the Department of Transport cannot allow 1.6 million people or motorists to join the roads because the roads would become gridlocked.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to get into having a little bit of a rant. Because in my opinion, there is absolutely no evidence being produced in this video to suggest that the DVSA are acting fraudulently and fixing tests. In my opinion, they are absolutely not. I'm not saying I am an expert authority on the DVSA and driving test pass stats, but to be perfectly honest, I know a hell of a lot more than an interviewer who has zero experience and a former instructor who left the industry after just a year.
Yeah.
So in their wisdom in 1950, the Department of Transport decided that they were going to limit the passes. And I think they originally did it just for a short period of time, but they soon realised it was a cash cow and they couldn't be challenged on it because nobody would ever figure it out.
So what do you think the government are making then from all of this?
Well, through fails, deliberate fails, they're making 750 million.
Bloody hell.
Yep, it's a lot of money. And through the passes, they're making... I correct it. They're making 75 million annually through the deliberate fails, and they're making a further 50 million through the people that are passing who are fortunate enough to be on the pass list.
I have no idea where Rob is getting his figures from here. Despite that though, if you just have a quick look at the DVSA's annual report and accounts, you'll clearly see that driving test fees are not a cash cow for the government. In their 2022-2023 accounts, which are publicly available on the gov.uk website, we can see their annual income was nearly £407 million. However, their annual operating costs were over £433 million, actually resulting in a net loss of £26.5 million.
So what are you doing about this?
So when the lady failed her driving test on the 25th of January 2020, I challenged the examiner because I believed that he was wrong. And because I challenged the system, I had my licence removed to teach on the 4th of June 2022.
Again, I think Rob is way off beam here. In my 17 so years of experience as a driving instructor, I've respectfully challenged numerous examiners about test results. And when I have, either I've been enlightened, I suppose, in gaining further knowledge about how an examiner works and how they assess a test, which has helped me to learn and develop, or I've respectfully agreed to disagree with them. But I've never been hauled over the coals or received any type of disciplinary warning from the DVSA. It just simply doesn't happen. And also, when you think about it, driving examiners and driving instructors really are sort of two sides of the same coin. We're all working towards improving driving standards, to support new drivers and to make our roads safer. Now, that said, I am sure there are some corrupt driving examiners, as no doubt there are some corrupt driving instructors. But I think, in my opinion and in my experience, they are in a very, very, very small minority, and we should not all be tarred with the same brush.
You had your licence removed because you challenged it.
Yeah, well, not only because I challenged it, but because of the situation that I found myself in, because I was attacked through emails, letters and phone calls to my daughter's school, my wife's work, and I had threatening letters through the letterbox.
And is that presumably to silence you so that you wouldn't, talk about this, keep it silent, because it's obviously a big fraud?
Well, this situation arose through Red Driving School, who I was a franchisee for at the time. I asked them for technical assistance in regards to this roundabout, and they refused to give me it, even though I was paying £90 a week for technical assistance and for student allocation.
Okay, so here I think we're getting into the root cause of Rob's claims and grievance, because, of course, I'm reading between the lines, but it sounds to me like he felt at least that he was badly let down by Red Driving School and was basically left to figure everything out for himself, which is almost impossible to do with just a year into the job and no real idea as to how the system works.
But I suppose my point is they are misinterpreting it.
Oh, they're deliberately misinterpreting it because it suits their purposes.
Yeah. So what's going on now then?
So after, believe it or not, 13 or 14 court cases, I'm back in court with the DVSA for a further 3 court cases.
Oh my God, in my opinion, I think Rob has disappeared down a deep, dark rabbit hole here. I totally get his passion, his sense of injustice, and his desire to fight back against a system which he feels is against him. And I get that. I've been there myself in a different industry, and I don't like to feel disempowered. I don't like to feel that I'm being bullied and forced into a situation that I feel isn't of my making, as I'm sure we all do. And of course he may have been badly let down by Red Driving School, but I think in his frustration and naivety he's putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 40.
So, I mean, the more worrying thing I think the audience will take from this is of course, that this is going on, that they are, and we saw the figures that you provided, they are failing people who should not necessarily be failed. They're finding a reason to fail, and whether they're good, bad or indifferent, 50% of the people who take the test are not passing through no fault of their own. It might be through fault of their own, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That they're deliberately failing people.
Well, they've muddied the waters to the extent where nobody knows whether you had a genuine pass or fail, because a driving instructor who sits in the back of the car cannot comment whether they believe that was a fair test or not. If you do comment, they will remove your licence, as they did to myself.
Yeah.
Again, if you are an ADI or a PDI, don't feel like you cannot speak to an examiner about a test result, and respectfully challenge some of their thinking and their marking. They'll be more than happy to have a brief conversation with you. It will need to be brief because they've only got a limited amount of time to prepare for their next test. And also, if you feel like there is a repeated pattern with a particular examiner or a particular test centre in the way that results are going for your students, then you can always request a conversation with the test centre manager, and they'll be more than happy to sit down with you, listen to you carefully, and take on board your thoughts, your comments, and your concerns.
Well, this does sound. I mean, there'll be people who are gobsmacked really to know that, certainly that the fraud is going on. Do you think that will stop?
Well, I honestly don't know, because I thought, when being raised correctly by my parents, that telling the truth was the way to go. And I understand why driving instructors don't come forward to say these things openly, because I'm currently approximately £350,000 in debt because of the situation that the Department of Transport and the DVSA have put me in through the perjurious statements and false statements given to the local newspaper.
Wow. It seems Rob has invested so far around £350,000 in legal and court fees to try to prove that the DVSA are acting fraudulently. Now, obviously, I admire his determination and resolve, but personally, I think that is madness, particularly as the whole thing seems to have stemmed from just one single driving test fail, and he's just got a bee in his bonnet and has just decided, again perhaps because of a lack of support from Red Driving School, to take on the system and challenge them full on. All that said, I do genuinely wish Rob all the best in settling his claim with the DVSA, and hopefully we'll get an update at some point on how he gets on. Now, what are your experiences? What have you found? If you're an instructor or a training instructor, have you sometimes thought that the DVSA are fixing test results? Do you have any evidence that they are? And if you're a learner and you haven't been successful in passing your L test, did you think your test was unfairly treated and unfairly marked? Let me know in the comments below. As I said, I think this could get spicy. I'm happy to have a respectful but lively debate. I'm sure there are many opinions on this from all sides of the argument. It's not that one person is right or the other is wrong. Let's just share information and opinion, and hopefully we can maybe form some conclusions over time. Okay, that's it for now. Cheers and take care as always. Bye.